Hello, guys, and welcome back to the Results Loading podcast hosted by Prosperous AI. I'm your host, Michael Atkin, and joining us today on the pod, we have a very special guest, the CEO and co-founder of ChiefAIOfficer.com, Chris Daigle. Chris, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for the invitation, Michael.
Absolutely. So, Chris, diving right in here, you have quite the extensive background, and your experience is just off the charts. To kick us off, can you speak a little bit to your professional journey and how you ended up here as the co-founder and CEO of ChiefAIOfficer.com?
Yeah, for sure. First, I may start with an unpopular opinion, but I'm an entrepreneur, and I don't know that that's something that you can learn in school. I was born an entrepreneur, so my journey started with me arbitraging candy in the 5th grade, buying it at a discount and marking it up, supply and demand environment. But the professional career, I guess we'll go way back. In 1995, I was waiting tables at a restaurant in the Caribbean. Met a girl from San Francisco, said, hey, I'll go out there and learn some of this computer stuff. We ended up in San Francisco at about a time when enterprise resource planning software was becoming a very big deal, SAP in particular. And I went from waiting tables. I went and studied it for about 30 days, got hired by Accenture Consulting, or Anderson Consulting back then, that's now Accenture. And I went, within 30 days, I went from waiting tables in Berkeley to working on Halliburton UK's $100 million install of SAP or whatever it was. And that was my first exposure to what was possible in the world. Like, my financial thermostat just hadn't been set that, wow, this is possible. And that opened the door really for the growth that came from being an entrepreneur. I was thrown into an environment where I had minimal training and high expectations from the clients. They were billing me out even back then at like $19.99 at like $250 an hour. No friends, no support. And it was really a crucible environment, trial by fire. And that was a huge learning opportunity for me. And for anybody out there that's listening, if you are struggling in your business right now and you're going through the stuff, that's part of the recipe. That's not something to avoid. As Buddha said, life is suffering. So you came here to do this thing. So to encourage anybody who's going through some really tough times in their business, understand that the only way that you fail is if you stop, is if you quit. I've heard Hormozy say that recently, but it's a pretty universal. You learn something from every mistake that you make, every ass kicking that you get, every no that you hear from a prospect or client. So don't look at those as discouraging or negative things. Actually be encouraged by whatever suffering that you're going through as a startup founder or a participant in a startup. That is how you grow. And this is part of your story. If the story was, well, I got lucky, that's not that's not what it's about. But that has led me to, I guess the ascension in my career was going from consultant to getting involved in digital marketing to really, I would say that a true force multiplier or unfair advantage that I've had over other entrepreneurs was that I was not afraid to go and introduce myself to somebody at an event or to reach out to somebody on LinkedIn. I don't care if they think I'm an idiot. If they say, yes, I'd like to talk, or, hey, great to know you. Here, try this. That access is a currency that you cannot earn any other way except for putting yourself in an uncomfortable position and saying, hi, I'm vulnerable. I'd like to get to know you. Now, that isn't something that you usually get immediate benefit from in your business. It's something that it's like the quote, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The next best time, right now. And what I mean by that is that the time is going to pass anyway. It's going to be 20 years from now in your career. If you have spent that time investing and cultivating in relationships with other people who match your integrity level, that match your emotional quotient and all those things, you're going to end up with a network of people who did just like you. They stuck with it. They had the ups, they had the downs, but 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the road, they're now high achievers in their space because they stuck with it. That has opened doors for me beyond any skill that I've learned, any pedigree I could have gotten from any college. So I would encourage any entrepreneur that is out there, a startup founder, build your network and be okay to say, hey, I'm just getting started. I love what you're doing. How can I support you? Would love here's a trick that I learned. And I think it's an old Silicon Valley maxim. If you ask for money, they give you advice. If you ask for advice, they give you money. And what that means is that if you go to people, even if you're looking for investors or material support for your business, if you go and say, hey, listen, I respect what you've done in your career. I'm in a similar situation that I think you've probably experienced in your life. I'd love to get some advice. As a successful entrepreneur, advice to me seems like, oh, sure, no problem. And I'll tell you that advice that you get can transform you, and the advice that you give can transform you. I've had so many entrepreneurs over the years come back and say, I just want to thank you. I don't know if you remember who I am, but we met at a party and you gave me this bit of advice. And that was a pivotal moment in my career. And as a result, like, we're crushing it, whatever the success story is. So the network's important. And I think just this, my path, the way that I got here was, as an entrepreneur, we have a blessing and a curse, and that is that we're able to see opportunities that other people are not. Now, the blessing, of course, is that it gives you the ability to kind of see around corners when it comes to opportunities. The curse is that there's opportunities everywhere. Where do I start? How do I put on the blinders? What are my filters to make sure that I'm not shiny object syndrome, sufferer, and trying to do 2 or 3 things simultaneously? Because the reality is, very few, and you may think, oh, I'm much smarter than this guy that's talking right now, and that's probably the case. But I can tell you that if you try to do too much at once, the way that I saw it was, the analogy was an airplane. And they mentioned Heathrow Airport has a airplane taking off every minute. Every 60 seconds, there's a plane. And that works. They don't all try to take off at once. If they did, it would be just a hot mess. So if you are an entrepreneur and you've got multiple opportunities, what I would suggest is the same advice that was given to me that I live by. Let your first plane or project get off the ground and start to get some momentum and stability before you start to try to pilot the next project off the ground. Can you do it? Yes. But it's going to create undue stress. And if we look at things over a longer time period, a signal versus noise time period, today I may look at another entrepreneur and go, oh my gosh, he's starting 3 businesses simultaneously. This guy's, he's a monster. She's going to crush it. Check back in a year. None of those will have taken off. They'll all still be close, but nothing. And the entrepreneur who started something and got it off the ground and then started the next thing will have multiple projects that have launched. So don't feel discouraged if you haven't, in the plane analogy, you haven't taken off yet, and evaluate, is it because I'm trying to fly too many planes simultaneously? If it is, good luck, but it's going to be a mess. So a big ramble, but some key points that have really had an impact on me and others that I've shared that with.
No, absolutely. And I think you hit so many nails on the head there. I'm going to have to pick and choose what I respond to. But as a founder myself, and going through the initial startup days with our business, I couldn't agree more with the element of picking one thing to focus on and getting that project off the ground. Because I think, like you said, there's such initial high levels of energy and enthusiasm. You've taken the leap to starting a company. That alone is a gigantic step away from a lot of people who start in the corporate world, such as yourself, such as me, such as my business partner. Most people do that because they need that initial experience. But then it's like, okay, wow, I've done it. I've started my own company. I've taken the gigantic leap of faith, but now I want to do every single thing in my power to get this company up and running. And if you aren't organized and you don't have a clear vision as to what you want to accomplish, like you said, if Heathrow has 20 planes taking off at the same time, like, it's going to be a disaster. But one plane after another every 60 seconds, that's a lot of planes and a lot of people in the sky. getting off the ground. And I think that's such an invaluable lesson, because we talk to a lot of kids coming out of college and their enthusiasm is just off the charts. Like, I want to do everything. And the reality is, you gotta, that's great. And you want to have that energy, that drive to go out and get something accomplished, but get one thing off the ground at a time, and come back and start implementing that mindset into every single task that you have. And before you know it, you got a company that's firing on all cylinders because you executed correctly from the start. And I think that's great piece of advice for those listening who are thinking about getting into the startup space or who are just getting started now. Take a deep breath, identify your priorities, and then go and execute. And so I'm glad you said that, because I think it's really, really important, especially for those early days, Chris.
Yeah.
And with that being said, can you talk us a little bit about the genesis of chiefaiofficer.com and how you
Sure.
got to this point? What's the story behind that?
So for my own businesses, I started implementing EOS back in 2017, and it stands for Entrepreneurial Operating System, and it's basically an OS, or an operating system, for your business. It's a framework of 6 areas of the business that, if you follow their protocols, you have a clear plan, you have a way to measure success and momentum towards that plan, and you are checking in regularly enough, you're establishing culture, like all those good things. So I did it for my own business, and the book that started that was a book called Traction by Gino Wickman. Worked so well with my businesses. As I mentioned, my network is full of high achievers. They all started asking, hey, can you do it for us? So almost as a side business, I started going into my friends' businesses and doing a 2-day process that we call Ignition, where we run through essentially the EOS planning phase. And I was able to apply that at businesses that were less than $1 million to businesses that were already doing $1 billion a year plus. And for me personally, I saw confirmation over and over and over again that, hey, this planning stuff, even though entrepreneurs don't like it, this planning stuff actually works. We were doing that in the financial publishing space, and that industry is like, if you think about companies like Motley Fool. So we were doing that in that space when generative AI became accessible to most through the release of ChatGPT 3.5 and late November 2022. When that happened, very quickly, I recognized that this tool could be an accelerant for achieving the results that we mapped out in the EOS phase. And the genesis was, hey, let's continue to do this consulting. We'll just add AI into our mix. And then I realized pretty quickly, as much as I love my clients, consulting kind of sucks. And there's not a lot of leverage there. You're trading hours for dollars in most scenarios. And that's, as an entrepreneur, an environment or paradigm that you want to avoid. So I said, well, why don't our business growth framework is very successful. Why don't we teach that to others, introducing the tools? And that's essentially, that was the initial idea. It's since turned into a much more robust environment for preparing individuals to be the subject matter expert, be the leader of generative AI's introduction into, we focus on SMBs because enterprise, there's a lot of competition with Accenture and Deloitte and McKinsey. SMBs don't have access to that type of talent. So our mission is to empower individuals to either go back to the company where they're already working and doing it, or coaches, consultants, or individuals who want to go out there and do this with other companies, but to fill that gap for SMBs so that they've got tactical tool knowledge, but they also have a framework to apply that tool. Because if most of you are probably, if you're not already using AI, you're interested in it. Here's what I would tell you, that learning the tools alone is not going to have a huge impact in your business. You need to also understand the domain of business. Most businesses have universal processes: payroll, customer service, marketing, sales. I don't care if you're Ford or if you're, Freddy's lemonade stand. There's general activities that occur within business, small or large. If you don't understand those, but you know the tools, you can go in, but when you talk to the business owner or your team, you say, okay, where do we start? I don't know. But if you have the tool knowledge and you have the understanding of how businesses operate, you can go in and truly be that Sherpa, that guide for the company and say, okay, guys, I know there's a lot of confusion. You ready to get started? Here's how we're going to do it. We're going to start here. We're going to identify low risk, high impact pilot projects. And let's start with things that you don't like doing anyway. We'll prove concept. We'll process mine, process map. We'll apply automation, augmentation, which is human in the loop, AI plus human, or a pure AI opportunity. At each step of that process, once we do that, we get that process working. Hey, it didn't take it off your plate completely, but you're doing 20% less, 50%, whatever that impact is, it's measurable and everybody can see it. And the immediate response is, hey, that was cool. That was easy. Let's do more. Boom, boom, boom. And then we start working on more pilot projects within a company. So that's kind of, I guess, the genesis of where we are now and what we've become. And it's, as we were hoping, the impact on the individuals who are going through this stuff and the companies where they're using this has been undeniable, exciting, and truly transformative for these companies.
Totally. And I'm glad you touched on the magic of AI. Owning an AI company myself, a lot of kickback and hesitation or resistance, if you will, has come from those mid-market companies, often owned by people in their 40s, 50s, 60s, who aren't necessarily as tech savvy, who have just made their migration over to the cloud a few years ago.
Yeah.
And now, the market has kind of gone into this such a mainstream AI centric place that there's been a lot of hesitation. And so for you to go in and demonstrate that AI magic and say, see, it's not that hard. It's not that scary. It's actually really, really fantastic. And now we're taking 20% of the, or we're increasing productivity by X amount of percent, or we're reducing the time it takes to do this task by 30% and then 40%. That's really the entry into the market and overcoming those initial barriers that I think you and I can specifically relate to very well, which kind of leads me into my question is, as you and I both know, the entry into the AI market is specifically a tough conversation, to put it lightly. What are the most significant challenges you have faced when trying to do AI integration into some of these mid-market companies? Is most of your business inbound, or how are you having or overcoming those conversations when the initial response, especially from the mid-market, has been hesitation, especially with a conversation such as AI?
The first thing that we do is we educate whoever the decision makers are, whoever the ones that were like, hey, let's try this AI thing out. The first thing we want to do is educate them and their the same strata. Like if it's a leadership team, let's get all of them in a room and let's just go through the basics. We don't focus on our end. We don't focus on data science or any of the technical side of AI at all, because SMBs, they just need more. They need more bandwidth. They need more output. They like business intelligence that's drawn from a deep analysis of their data. They're not ready for that yet anyway. So the first thing we do is we come in and we say, guys, yes, there's a geeky side to it. We can talk a little bit about that, but then we move into, here's the tool stack that we recommend. Here's what they cost. Here's how we use them. Here's the limitations, because they're not magic. It looks like magic until you get behind the curtain. So we just got to get them familiar with, oh, I understand what that tool does. I understand why I'd use that. And we usually cover a stack of maybe 5 to 7 tools. Once we do that, then we kind of move into, okay, guys, now that you know this stuff, why do you want it? Well, we want to grow. Okay, well, tell me about that growth. We move into conversations that have nothing to do with AI. They have to do with, are you clear on what you're doing, like with your business? Like, where do you want to be in 5 years, 3 years, a year, next quarter? We get them clear on those things, because once you've identified those targets that are far out and close in, it's much easier to identify which tools will support the compression of that result cycle, right? And there's no doubt that AI can do that. So that would be the best place to start, is just get them educated on, hey, here's what's possible. I usually like to introduce a couple of example case studies that they can all relate to that aren't terribly complicated. And one of those that I like to start with is customer service. I've owned customer service call floors. All of us have customer service. It seems to me that it is an opportunity for a business to really blow it. The sales made, great. Let's do more of that rather than let's service the customers. And if you've been involved in marketing, or you understand that monetizing an existing customer is so much easier than trying to monetize a prospect over and over again. So, and I explain that to them. And then we look at, here's an example. How many customer service agents do you have now? How many inbound inquiries do you have now? And I'll throw up a map. Here's what it looks like, what they're doing now. They're receiving the ticket. They're evaluating the ticket. They're entering it into the thing. They're pushing it down the line, right? Or escalating the event. That's on average about 11 to 17 minutes for a ticket. That same ticket comes in. If we build an AI-powered automation for your business, that same ticket goes through that same process in a matter of seconds. Well, big deal. You saved me 11 minutes. No, let's look at that. If you're getting 100 tickets a day, 500 tickets a day, it ends up being, 30, 40, 50 hours a day just from that one simple thing that's being saved. Now, I don't advise that they go and fire all the customer service agents. What I do is I advise that they teach them how to use your internal tools so that they are there to give human discretion to queries that require that, right? A lot of them don't. The 80-20 don't need a human, but we just don't have an outlet except to have the human go and look the thing up or to provide the password or whatever the case might be. So I show them that, and then we say, okay, let's look at the numbers here. What are you paying per hour for this? What, or how many tickets are you, if you could process more tickets, what is that worth? And what I'm looking to do is I'm looking to identify whatever KPI that they use to determine whether or not that process is good, bad, or ugly. And then we say, okay, what if we could impact that KPI? I usually start with a 20% improvement on that KPI if it's an AI-powered process now. 20% is usually pretty low, actually. But if I can show them, because a saying that I heard a long time ago is arithmetic is not an opinion. If I can show you the numbers, it's hard for you to argue with that impact extrapolated over 30, 50, 1,000 processes within your business. And you start going, oh my gosh, like I see it. I get it. How fast can we do it? So there's a couple of things. You educate the decision maker so that they understand that this isn't black magic that they're messing with. You show them a case study that's applicable to their operations. You show them the impact that AI typically has on that process. And then you go exponential. Let's look at this over 10 processes, 50 processes. What is that worth? And the economic impact, not counting morale boost, not counting higher net promoter score, any of those things that come from you operating more efficiently, just the revenue side of things, the impact it has makes it people are discouraged from saying, no, we don't want this AI stuff. They're like, let's try more of that. So that's the challenge. It's just, how do I use it? Right. That's the biggest thing. And if you show them that, they start thinking, oh, could we use it for this? Hey, could we use it for this? And the answer is yes, yes, yes. So
yeah, no, it's a great point, because I think the onslaught of AI happens so quickly, and ChatGPT came into play, and I think people who are less technically savvy, it was intimidating, and they saw it everywhere, and they kind of understood what it did, but there was no way they were ever going to get hands-on with it.
Yeah.
And you mentioned black magic, and I think that's a great way to put it, because that really is the way a lot of people who own businesses and have, successful long-time businesses perceive AI. But then you mentioned impact. And I think once you can get over that hump, and like I said, alleviating those anxieties about AI, it's not black magic. It is applicable to literally everything. Let me show you. We don't even need to talk about you or your business or anything specific, but let's talk about your pain points. What are some of the things keeping you up at night as a business owner that you wish you could improve by X%, 20% we keep talking about? It's like, well, AI can kind of help with customer service, and we can alleviate these tickets, and we can bring the 11 minutes down to 0, X, Y, and Z, what have you. And it's like, you see the light bulb turn on and you go, oh, wow, this isn't that bad. And Chris is here to kind of walk us through it. This isn't as bad as I thought. It's not black magic, because look at the impact it has on my business. And I think getting over those hurdles is incredibly, incredibly important for AI companies in the mid-market specifically, to drive those conversations, attain further use cases to say, hey, look what it did for X, Y, and Z company. It can do the same thing for you. You just have to open your ears a little bit and trust me, because, as you recall, the best way I like to describe it and compare it to is when the introduction of the cloud. I mean, when I was in high school, I was like, what do you mean? Even, like I said, a kid,
Wow. Yeah.
the cloud, what do you mean my data is in the cloud? Like, everyone kind of thought it was an actual cloud. It is kind of an interesting thing to observe in terms of the integration into, just the general day-to-day AI world and into the common businesses these days. So I'm glad you touched on that, Chris. With that being said, more on the building side for you and the genesis of chiefaiofficer.com. One main element that we kind of like to touch on here at the Results Loading podcast is overcoming adversity during kind of the come up or building phase of your startup. So as a founder of a startup right now, I can certainly say I'm no stranger to overcoming obstacles and that adversity that I've been talking about, you and I have been discussing. But knowing a bit about your background, I have a feeling you're no stranger to it either, to put it lightly. I know we touched on it a little bit here, but can you talk about a moment more specifically when absolutely nothing was going your way? You almost felt like giving up, and obviously you're still here sitting talking to me, but how did you push through that feeling, if you can describe a moment like that?
So it helps if there's a quote by John Doerr, and he says, in business, you're either a missionary or a mercenary, right? It helps for you to know which one you are, okay? If you're a mercenary, if you're doing this for economic intent, it's important for you to keep that front of mind. Oh, baby, I'm going to be rich when this thing hits, whatever motivates you. But it's important for you to understand that so that you can make sure that that is your North Star in those hard times. If you're a missionary, I started this as all my things and with integrity, but as a mercenary, I started this business to make money. In the process of working with the tools and seeing the impact it's got, that has shifted considerably. So now I'm a missionary about this stuff. So for me, when I hit those hard times, the thing that reminds me is like, or that keeps me going is the impact. Okay, man, as soon as this product launches, as soon as this content is out, whatever it is, whoever sees this, it's going to have an impact. And I've made a lot of money in my life, had impact, I guess, but that wasn't my focus. And now my focus is truly with the impact that I'm able to introduce into companies, the money will follow. But the money alone doesn't give you the satisfaction of I empowered these people, right? Like they're taken like that. That is an experience that hopefully all of you get to have in business. So again, identifying if you're a missionary or mercenary and keeping whatever that goal is first and forward. Secondly, I think I referenced it already, but Hormozy advice, it's not just from him, but the only way that I can fail is if I quit showing up. And I can tell you that if you're expecting to get rich in your startup, it rarely happens overnight. It is the cliche of it only took them 20 years to be an overnight success, right? Or hopefully the cycle's a little bit shorter for you. But if you're not prepared to understand that there is a cycle that you go through and the cycle is not rosy, and if you go into that naive, get a job, right? Work at somebody else's startup. There is an immense amount of pressure that comes from being particularly the founder. You're everybody's daddy or mama, right? Like you don't get to have a crap day. And if you do it outside where others can't see you. But it is important that you take that position that you've got, the privilege that you have of being the founder or on the founding team, and you respect that privilege and you treat it as such, and you don't casually like, oh, poor me, I'm working so hard. Yeah, you're working hard, and that's what's going to make it worth it. If you look at it through that lens, then, and you understand, hey, this, you're writing the story right now, the story where the person, there's no hardship, there's no challenge. Two things are going to occur. One, you're not going to grow, right? And outside of the financial reward that comes from this, if you have enough self-respect to appreciate the fact that you're growing yourself, that you are going through the crucible, and that you are going to come out, hardened steel on the other end, like that is why you do this. If you're just doing a startup to get rich, go join somebody else's startup, man. You won't have to work as hard. You still get, usually if you start early, you get equitable interest in the company. You get bragging rights of saying, oh yeah, I was employee number whatever. But you also don't have the responsibilities that do not end, that come with being the founder, or that visionary of the company, or the attractive avatar, I think, as Russell Brunson calls it. But and if it's too hard for you, quit. If that's who you are, quit. Go get a job. Not saying that in a negative way. You do not want, if you are not cut out for this, you are going to suffer, and it is going to be hard, and you will not get a break. If you're cut out for this, you're going to eat that suffering for breakfast, because you're going to love it. You're going to know, hey, this is part of me becoming the person who can do this thing. So, I mean, I guess it's not for everybody. And startups, most of them fail. And if you are not prepared for that, it doesn't mean that you're weak. It doesn't mean that you're less than or anything like that. It just means that there's a different path for you, or there's a different season for you. It just may not be that season for you right now. I'm 51 years old. This is the first time that I've started a business that I was passionate about. That wasn't just, oh, this model generates this much revenue, let's go and build that model. So it took this long for me to find something I was passionate about. If you're not there yet, if the passion will not carry you through, that's okay. It just this business may not be the right idea for you now, and the timing, you just may not be the person who's ready to do this thing. So be honest with yourself.
Yeah, no, it's a great point, because the passion is such a prerequisite or a requirement. Because if you don't have that drive, if you're not willing to work holidays and weekends and put everything you absolutely have into a startup, it's just not going to work out. And this is a very basic analogy, but I kind of like to tell people it's kind of like a barber shop in a way, because if you're a barber and you're not physically in there cutting hair, basically if you take a day off and you're not cutting hair, you're not getting anywhere. You don't have the foundation of a corporation. You don't have the foundation of just being an employee. If you haven't physically done it, if you haven't physically picked up the phone and made the calls, sent the emails, do the building, put the time in, plus the suffering and tears and all the other elements that come with it, it's not for you. And I think it's a great point for anyone listening who are considering. When my business partner and I sat down and decided to go about this, I had no idea what it was going to require.
Yeah.
I've learned on the way, and you have to be adaptable, and mainly you have to be open to that constructive criticism and being kicked around every day for months and months on end until you start making some progress, which does come. But getting to that point, it does get easier, but there are days when it's like, man, what am I doing here? You get kicked under the couch and then chewed up, spit out, set on fire all over again. And it's only Tuesday.
We call it riding the bull.
Yeah.
Rodeo.
Exactly. And you've gone to hell and back, and it's only, it's Wednesday morning or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like, man, maybe I should have gotten a job. But Chris, to your point, those who are able to overcome those obstacles and, take it on the chin and learn from those mistakes are the ones who end up seeing that financial success, which is why I think everyone gets into this business. It definitely takes something. It takes some muscle and some grit. But if you're able to kind of overcome it and you start seeing some progress, you start seeing some revenue, you establish a customer base, things can change for you in a positive way really quick.
And, a bit of advice, especially if you're just getting started and you're having those hard days, if your product or service is as good as you want to produce in the marketplace, talk to your customers and having that conversation where they're like, oh man, this was so helpful. Whatever they say that's encouraging, that'll kick the can a little bit further down the road for you. You'll remember that there is a reason why you're doing this and that you're making a difference in people's lives with your product. So if you're trying to do this and not talk to your customers, you're missing out on a free gift, and that is the feedback that they give you, good, bad, or ugly.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because the market feedback and listening to what the market has to say is such an important element of this business. We went through it, and you through high volume outreach and having those conversations with the customers, you can think you have the greatest idea and the greatest product on the planet, but if the market doesn't respond positively to it, then what does it matter? So I'm really glad you said that. That's something I forgot to bring up, because that market feedback is so crucial, because if you just listen to what the people are actually saying, the people who are going to be handing you money, maybe you should listen, especially if there's a common pattern or there seems to be a theme across, several conversations across the board. So thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, for sure.
Want to switch gears real quick a little bit on the more positive side of building startups and why we do this. Chris, for you, what does success mean beyond the metrics, beyond the milestones, beyond the revenue? What allows you, Chris, co-founder and CEO of ChiefAIOfficer.com, to go to bed with a smile on your face, regardless of, like I said, the amount of customers, the revenue you brought in? Why do you do this? What does success look like for you, Chris Daigle?
For me, freedom is a very desirable outcome. And in my life as an entrepreneur, I have created freedom in the past where the lack of obligation to other people's expectations was extremely rewarding for me. I was able to meditate, spend time with my family, do whatever it was that I wanted, that I felt, devil makes work for idle hands, right? But that was never the issue for me. So understanding, and if you haven't had, if you're in the startup and it's just about the money, you're missing out on a privilege of being a free, sovereign individual who can make choices that aren't dependent on whether it's a Monday or a Saturday. And that in itself, regardless of how much money you make from this endeavor, that is a reward that for me personally, is hard to compare against. So it's knowing that I'm building, but also I'm not into fancy stuff necessarily. That doesn't drive me. For me, what drives me is I want to make sure that my family, because I think as Wayne Dyer put it, he said, life is a sexually transmitted terminal disease, right? So we're all going to die. And I want to make sure that in a healthy way, that those who I care about have access to resources to pursue interests in their life, not the Gucci bag. That's not the interest I'm talking about, but the creative limits that they have, or the giving back. And well, I'd love to help, but I got to pay the bills, honey. That's taken care of. Go help. Right. So knowing that I have the ability to create that type of future for my family is extremely inspiring.
I think that's a great answer. No, I mean, what more as a dad could you ask for? And like you said, I mean, everyone dies. You might as well have given it your all, and really, on your deathbed, man, I did everything I could, and I didn't just maintain a comfortable position in my professional career and my financial life. I really went for it, and I reaped the benefits, not just for me, not just for the Gucci bags and Ferraris, but establishing a specific level of financial comfort for my family. Because at the end of the day, as a father, I don't know what could be more rewarding, coming from someone who isn't a father yet, but I completely see where you're going with that, and really appreciate that sentiment.
Cool. It works for me.
Excellent, Chris. Well, Chris, thank you so much. This has been
my pleasure.
Just a fantastic conversation. good luck to you and everything over at
Thank you,
chiefaiofficer.com.
Michael.
If there's anything else you want to add or say at this point, now would be a great time to do so.
No, other than, listen, do not be intimidated by the application of AI. If you think that there are technical hurdles that you need to go through, pick any tool that's out there right now, spend 5 minutes with it, and you're going to go, hey, wait a minute, I can use this, right? So please don't sell yourself short and come up with excuses on why you shouldn't be using it. And look, we have every month we do a 3-day, we call a Facebook challenge about using AI at work. It's free. I blow everybody away with all the content. We have a Facebook group called Using AI at Work. If you go there, join, there's no cost. And I'd love to help you get to the point to where you felt like you were AI powered, AI literate, ready to rock. So do that. Love to help you on your journey, whoever's listening and interested in AI. So, or find me on LinkedIn, Chris Daigle. I think my LinkedIn handle is Dr. Daigle. It's a nickname that the industry gave me a while back. And let's have some fun with it.
Absolutely. Well, Chris, fantastic. Congrats again. Thanks so much. And good luck to you. We'll check in with you maybe in a year or so and see what things are looking like for Chief AI Officer and Dr. Chris Daigle.
Beautiful. Thanks, everybody.